And we are back with another episode of Diffusion podcast. Today we have Lucas Russo, key collaborators in Tools for the Commons, and also founder of Square Marketing Consulting. Lucas, it's amazing having you here. We've been working a lot together, and of course, there's for a lot for there with the audience. This specific episode will be about economic zones, especially those ones we are building around the digital infrastructure when it comes to Tools for the Commons. So it'll be nice to hear all your thoughts on that. But first of all, why don't you provide a short background on yourself? How did you ended up get interested in network state?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll do. Well, first of all, Ricardo, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and also to talk about a subject that really interests me and one that I'm trying to get more and more involved by the day. Basically, my story is that I started as a management consultant working for big multinationals, but then I saw I wanted to make some more real impact, and during my professional journey, I stumbled across Titus Gebel's Free Private Cities book, which was very, very influential for me. Attended some conferences and have been trying to shift professionally towards helping those special economic zones, digital zones, special charter zones, all the topics I think we're going to discuss later in the podcast, which I think are really a better, more viable options for us living in the society we want to live in.
Amazing. Well, I usually like to be very transparent about myself. The reason I actually got interested in network state was first because I was raised into the, let's say now you can call it public infrastructure when it comes to blockchains.
Yeah.
But way before that, I was like full into Bitcoin. I was a Bitcoin maxi. And my understanding is, I don't know, I thought like financials would be the first part of the revolution we would see digitally. In a certain aspect was, but that was always something lacking that I saw in the space. Like accountability, like of course you cannot, it's not like we cannot audit what we see, and especially in blockchains like Ethereum, it's all registered. All the failures, all that went wrong is still there if you do an on-chain analysis. But it's still like it's not as easy to hold accountable the malicious agents that use that in the wrong way. So I think the governance element was something that was lacking. So thinking about probably economic zones, we are also talking about jurisdictions. So how do you see those zones like kind of like balancing the freedom that we have with blockchain protocols and also granting the necessary, let's say, safety that people need to actually live in society?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think, well, first, good caveat is that most people think of freedom, but not all of them think about the responsibility that comes along. So it's important that you're bringing this point. Before answering your question, though, I'd just like to get a brief description so we are better aligned on terms, right? Because sometimes we talk about special economic zones, and I also like to talk about special charter zones, which have some key differences, right? So when we're talking about special economic zones, those could be anything from the exporting and processing zones that we see, some free ports, some zones that are dedicated to a specific industry and that a certain government defines so they can boost this industry, right? Which is great, right? It enables those sectors and companies there to have a lot more business-friendly environment to do what they do best, right? But we have recently seen and experienced a different kind of special zones, which many people call it special charter zones, right? And I believe those are the kinds that have even more impact to do what you just described. For example, have this element of governance, right? They're called the charter because they have their autonomy, both regulatory and regarding tax, some even in the laws that they apply there, and also how they govern their space. So those special charter zones for me are the vehicle, the legal vehicle that will enable us to combine not only the innovation and the business friendliness of the special economic zones, also with the governance part and responsibility, you know? And then you were talking about the how to ensure that the things that happen there are under responsible. Yeah. So can you go? Can you repeat that part, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, we like when it comes to the digital era, the internet, for instance, has been a place that we had amazing progress when it comes to innovation. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also a lot of malicious agents that explore, that say, the gray
Yeah.
zones where the law and even the enforcement is not so strong. So how do we use and leverage economic zone, special jurisdictions,
Yeah.
to balance innovation and also safety?
Yeah. Perfect. At the end, I'd say it boils down to a matter of having better incentives to take the right decisions, right? If we think of the most of most governments we have right now, if you and I have a problem because both of us are in Brazil, we by default are gonna recur to the Brazilian jurisdiction, Brazilian courts, right? Those zones, on the other hand, they enable many different options for dispute resolution. They can have their own arbitration centers. They can record to common law, international courts, and all of those different kinds of mechanisms that the participants ultimately choose. And because they are subject to a market competition, let's say we have, I don't know, we can name a few, we can name Prospera, Itana, Zanzibar, and all of those zones competing for having businesses and entrepreneurs there. If they are not performing a good job in setting those disputes and providing responsibility and accountability for the parties that are operating in those jurisdictions, they will eventually lose customers and go out of business, right? So we cannot, I believe that in summary, we cannot have the perfect situation, but we can craft the incentives that will direct us towards better and better solutions.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting thing when it comes to special economic zone is that this is not something new. We know,
Yeah.
like, they've been driving progress even in countries like China, which I respect a lot when it comes to technological advancements that they did. So Shenzhen was one of the, let's say, the most iconic special economic zones that have raised in the last years, but we have multiple of them. So I'd like for probably you, because I know you have been studying economic zones, like to bring some examples, like because people might be wondering, oh, is this something
Yeah.
that is fictitious? It doesn't exist, but it's actually happening, and we just like I feel like us into the commons, we're bringing in the next generation of economic zones.
Definitely. I'm happy you brought this point. I was just writing an article actually and researching a bit of the history of the special economic zones. And though you're completely right in that the Chinese ones are the zones that really made this term more, well, got them worldwide recognition. Special economic zones exist much before that. I believe the first one that people recognize is one called Delos in ancient Greece. They established a free toll port over there in the 2nd century before Christ. Then we can also cite the Hanseatic League, right? The group of cities in Northern Europe that were formerly subject to their regional kingdoms and emperors, but they had a lot of autonomy as well to the trade. And then we got into the modern age, and we have the Chinese ones in the 70s, right, where China was experimenting with a way to boost their economic activity because they had seen that what they were trying in the mainland or in the rest of China was not working, right? And then because China got so much success from this, I think there is a statistic I can try and find, but I think it's something along the lines of from the 15 or 20 years after the institution of those special economic zones in China, they received almost half of all foreign direct investment made in developing countries, right? So they were really a funnel for development in the country that inspired many others. And then we come to the current state where those evolved, right? We can say that Shenzhen, probably the most successful one in China, inspired others as Dubai, For example, there's a Jebel Ali free zone over there, which is the proper formal name for a neighborhood kind of Dubai that concentrates a lot of those zones. But then we come to the modern age, let's call. And right now we have, I believe, one of the, well, just cite a few, and we can dig deeper into each of those. But I'd say Prospera is the most famous one, right? Because they have large degrees of regulatory and tax autonomy. But they also have Zanzibar in Tanzania, this archipelago that also has good regulatory autonomy. We have Catawba, which is indigenous reserve in South Carolina. They're also competing with Delaware and Wyoming, for example, in the LLCs and C Corp formation in the US. We have Rak Dal in the UAE as well, which is oriented towards the digital and creator economy. We have Itana, Nigeria. We have Astana Financial Center in Kazakhstan. So a bunch of those very innovative zones that appeal to different things than the traditional special economic zones did. Do you want to dig deeper into any of those?
Well, I think that was a lot of information. I love the fact that you brought like some context into it, historical context. I think for me, like it's really important for people to understand that most of the things that actually exist today, if you spend some time studying, you'll see that was done before. We
see the parallels, no?
Exactly. So we're not, like coming with something out of thin air. Is actually something like it's an improving. We are constantly improving old systems. And of course, I feel like me as personally, I believe we go through life cycles, societal cycles, and of course, economic cycles. That's not a new thing, but depending on each stage we are in a cycle, we have to come up with solutions that we did before, but reinvented. So it's crazy because people, when I bring up the name China, the word China, most people get all worked up, which for me is like, okay, I kind of see what they're coming from, because I was a kind of like, we are born in the West, so we see like, even the word China is like, you get allergies from it. But
raises a flag, a yellow flag at least.
I still lived in Europe, and of course, I had the opportunity to work there for 3 months. I saw, okay, they did something interesting here, much better in Brazil. I can assure most of people that are listening to this, they did something like they actually brought them from a place that Brazil is still stuck when it comes to economic policies. Of course, it's not like not nationwide spread, but it's still like they were able to do some changes that sometimes like you won't be able to change the whole nation, but if you do in a regulatory sandbox, you might be able to see some results. So I'll probably hear from you, like, for example, bringing China example, like how does that correlate to Brazil? Because you came back from Europe to Brazil like me, and I'm sure you have a lot of things to say. And what kind of solution would you not even implement, but like brainstorming here, how economic zones can help Brazil? And that's the Brazilians, of course.
Yeah, what you said about China, I think it's relevant because, especially in a country that has so much control over their internal affairs as China, trying to push for any kind of nationwide, or better said, nationwide change is extremely difficult, right? The consequences for the ruling party or the people that are in the government are so big that they're not willing to do that, even if we assume that they are well-intentioned, which is often not the case. So special economic zones, because they are restricted, and here I'm talking special economic and charter zones as well, but because they're restricted to narrow geography, they are a much easier pill for them to swallow, right? You can propose governments that are fairly restrictive, that they only have to allow for a more business-friendly regulation. They only have to forego some control in this narrow geography, and this will bring some huge economic benefits. This will boost GDP, that this will modernize the economy, that will have create jobs for the people, bring foreign investment, and all of those good things, right, that politicians like to used to sell them to their population, whilst maintaining control over the larger part of the country. But I think, well, we have to be reasonable and start with things that are achievable, right? And if it's not possible to go to a whole country and propose them, yeah, let's become let's go for complete free markets, and the state's now going to take care only of private property protection. This is not going to happen. But we can convince them to adopt those small beacons of freedom, both personal and entrepreneur, right? Economic freedom, and start from there. Well, for the people that can move there and start working there, that's great. And then my hopes is that once people around those zones see that they're working and the conditions of living there, the living standards are much better than in the rest of the country, then this becomes a start. This becomes the seed for some kind of bigger change, right? That can go nationwide. In Brazil, more specifically, we don't have the same kind of nationwide control as China does, but we are also a very federalized country. The states and municipalities have little autonomy to change the rules and regulations and do things as they please. I think there's a statistic about, or an episode a while ago about cities in Santa Catarina, one of Brazilian states, that started competing with the tax that they charge in new cars registrations, right? And they started competing, and it went down from like all of the municipalities charging 10% to one charging 2%, and it concentrated all the new car registrations in the state. And this is one of the very small, right? But this shows the power of the competition when we go to those smaller scales. And so if we can convince, even in more restricted fashion, some places, some cities even, to adopt greater levels of freedom, this will catalyze, this will aggregate businesses there and prosperity overall.
It's actually quite interesting that, as you mentioned, Brazil doesn't, let's say, the surveillance levels of China, but it's still it's actually quite funny, because Brazil is very, very oriented about paperwork. So
definitely,
like, we come from Roman law, basically. We don't come from common law. And notary is a thing in Brazil. It's actually a business, which is crazy.
right?
When I talk about with Anglo people, they're like, this is so inefficient. And what I feel like bringing common law into Brazil, I was talking to a guy about this. He's American, but he's actually, let's say, second generation of Chinese in America.
Okay.
And we're discussing about bringing common law into Brazil, in Latin America, and what is the implication of this. I think we're already noticing, like, there's a lot of tension, like political tension between big techs and government. And that's not just that. There's more things, because big techs come with contracts, and governments come with words. So it's a conflict between system technology and paperwork, bureaucracy, and innovation. So the thing is, like, it's a lot of cultural, like, peer pressure. Like, when we talked about technology with people, some people, they instantly, like, they, in their heads, they see all these words. Like, I won't even mention, but like, there's so much indoctrination that, like, they instantly become so defensive. They're not open to even discuss about it. So honestly, it's not China when it comes to, like, enforcing surveillance, but the own people, the own resident people, they enforce societal norms on each other. Like, no, this cannot be done this way. Why? Because it was always like this. So I feel like some parts of Brazil, they rather not go into it, and I think it's much easier bringing the economic zones perspective to it. In some regions, allow, like, at least the states to be more free, or even like being even more, let's say, realistic. And like, we can talk about private neighborhoods, like the one in Jurerê, and we're working around Floripa. But probably, like, if you want to explore that specific point about how we can apply, like, in a practical way, an economic zone how can I say, perspective into a neighborhood like Jupiter, because I know you're aware of what we're doing, so that might be interesting to. It's like, again, it's a brainstorming here as well.
Yeah. On just to stress your previous point about China, we cannot. I mean, I think it's silly to have those kinds of prejudices just because X thing happened in a place that we don't completely agree with. We're not going to take the best practices, right? For example, business formation in China is 10 times easier than in Brazil. That's not to say that we agree with the surveillance of the Chinese state, but they factually have have an easier process for opening businesses in China than in most of Brazil, and that's something that has helped them. So why not copy that, right? And then on your question, back to Brazil, it's hard again because so many things in Brazil depend on the central national government. So it's really a matter to go case by case and see what's the opening for changing things in each of the municipalities or states that we can engage with, right? So in the case of Floripa, to be honest, I'm not the most involved with, but it's analyzing what are the laws and regulations that Floripa has control over, and working with the regulators and entrepreneurs from there to try to make those more business friendly, right? So for example, if it's taxes over services, so if well, actually one thing that's really over municipality regulation is some licenses for smaller businesses, right? Why can so a lot of those businesses take weeks and months to be approved. The health inspection is it's a complicated process that involves dealing with a lot of state people, right? And this also creates a lot of space for corruption because there are people involved. What if we had a different process that was, look, if you're not going to open I don't know, a nuclear energy facility or something super risky, let's just grant you the authorization by default. You can open it, and while it's already running, you submit us the paper, and unless we find something really wrong with it, you just have the authorization by default. I think there was also another place that tried to implement, look, you submit the paperwork, and we should have X amount of time, I don't remember how much, to approve it. And if we don't, it's automatically approved because it's a low risk business. Can we do something like this as well in Brazil? I cannot see why we couldn't. Do you have any other suggestions as well that you think would fit well in the more narrow scope of municipalities and states in Brazil?
No, I think, like, again, as you know, in Tilsworth Commons, I think a lot of time spent is actually talking to authorities, talking to regulators, politicians, and Hugo is actually, I've never worked with someone which did this before, so I'm learning a lot. And I think there's this strength value in being able to talk with the police stations, because at the end of the day, especially in Brazil, they still hold a lot of power. With just a pencil, they can change a lot of things. When it comes to the whole country, it will always be more difficult. But perhaps, like, in a municipal level, we can do some stuff. But I'm not aiming like too big here. I'm more like, if we are able to digitize a certain aspect of it, it's already something big. And São Paulo, Tarcísio is already doing some progress in bringing like vehicle registration on that. Like, this is all tying up together with blockchain as well, because the idea is to bring this to blockchain, to, like, say, let's not say the word and notary, but at least like bring notary. They're already using blockchain internally, but it's not, let's say, embedded into the public infrastructure. So if you're able to do this slowly, but certainly we'll be able to see some advancements on the technology, and also on, let's say, a legislative level, they will see the need to adapt the law. So I feel like the technology will probably always move first, like we did with digital banking, with Pix. So I think that's pretty much how it works in Brazil. I think every region will be different, and I feel like in Tilsor Commons we're also paving the path to serve as a benchmark. Of course, everything that we're speaking here is in English, and it's not going to be accessible for everyone in Brazil. But I feel again we're bringing stuff here that will reach the right person, and they will make them to reflect what we're doing.
Yeah, no, hopefully it can serve as an inspiration. And just to riff on the last part you said, this might even be an easier path, right? Because in Brazil, the problem is not only the huge amount of taxes and tributes and regulations we have, but also how difficult it is to comply with all of them. So you have to pay those. I don't know how much is going to be our new VAT, 30%, 31%, but you also have to spend days figuring out how much to pay into each institution, and then you have to have teams of lawyers and accountants. So if we could even just go in this path of streamlining regulation, even though you still have to pay those huge 31% VAT and then all of the other taxes that, well, Brazil has, but if you could only pay them more straightforwardly, right? If this could be a direct and easy thing for you to do, then the overall cost of this regulation would be lower. And this, I think, for many governments, is something easier to do and easier for them to accept. So yeah, great point you raised on over there.
And actually, there are some things happening like in parallel to what is like actually there's two realities in Brazil, like the local realities and those ones that are actually expats like us that went outside Brazil because we had double citizen. And I know that now a lot of people are looking for having like more than just a nationality, having a second citizenship. And some people are actually looking into Paraguay, which is like in a certain way, like it's not official. I cannot say this is it's a nationwide trend, but it's happening, and also people are already doing that. We have discussed this before, but
yeah, we can bring the numbers, right? I think it's like 25%, 25,000 Brazilians change their tax residence to Paraguay every year, and productive people overall, right? When you see those kinds of migrations, you see UK losing millionaires and China and Brazil losing people that are changing tax residence to Paraguay. Those are people that could be doing great for the economy here, right? So it's a shame.
And if you like look at it at an economic level, economic zone level, it might even become like what Hong Kong was for Chinese, but like not officially. It's not being talked about this, but let's say Paraguay realizes the potential to become an economic zone for those that like want to move not too far from Brazil, but still have some freedom. So that's something that is still on the radar. I know, like now becoming a little bit more technical when it comes to blockchain. Solana, it's a digital public infrastructure. In the past, you call it distributed like public ledger, you call blockchain protocols, but at the end of the day, it's a public infrastructure digitally. So the idea is to actually build economic systems within it, and they have now something called the Solana Economic Zone. And
Solana Economic Zone.
Yeah, so Crecimiento Aleph, pop-up city that happened once in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Last year, they had the second edition as well, and they held an event called actually bringing Solana Economic Zone into Buenos Aires. And we know Milei, if it's not libertarian, is definitely the most liberal in terms of economic policies in Latin America in, I think, all time. So I think Argentina, like again, I know even with all of his progress, again, it's very difficult to change anything when like the modus operandi has always been in a certain way. So the thing is, I know like for a fact, Solana has demonstrated interest in perhaps bringing their infra to be, integrated into a small area of Buenos Aires to try and bring their own stable coins there and actually get like establishment businesses to operate digitally on their infra. And that way you have a small place that is Buenos Aires, Argentina, but it has a different currency. The economic system is running on a blockchain. So that's something that is interesting. It might be something in I don't know, next 2 years. But well, probably what we can actually talk about today, talking about what Brazilians can do. They have already been doing, like I mentioned, there are some numbers of Brazilians going to Paraguay, but now we bring the option of Zanzibar. So we are launching a digital economic zone
Yes.
in Zanzibar with Threefold and Zikia, which is the innovation department in Zanzibar. Of course, this is a zone that is quite far from Latin America, but the digital component makes it easier for people to actually get a company registered or even like a legal person. Of course, there are some local implications. How do you, how can I say, declare you're not more in Brazil anymore? That's something that is more complex, but it's still, why don't you explore that aspect of digital economics, and how can Brazilians probably, like in a scenario, use a digital economic zone like the one we're launching in Zanzibar in Africa?
Okay, sure. Before talking about Zanzibar, I'll just briefly talk a bit about the models for taxation countries have, right? So one of the reasons Paraguay is attracting so many Brazilians, and by the way, I thought it was super funny to think of Paraguay as the Brazil's Hong Kong. That'd be definitely comical if it happened. But Paraguay is attracting so many Brazilians because they have what's called a territorial taxation system, meaning that if you're a tax resident there, Paraguay is only going to tax you the revenue and profits that you make in Paraguay, meaning that if you're a tax resident in Paraguay and you have a company in Zanzibar, for example, that you use to service your clients, you're not going to pay anything. You're paying zero income tax on that because it's a foreign income. Brazil, on the other hand, is not as nice. And Brazil has what we call the global taxation system, meaning that for the Brazilian government, it does not matter where your income is generated. It's going to tax you either way, right? So that makes Brazil and other countries of global taxation much harder to fly from. But it can still be done. If you're gonna, and I'm not an expert on internationalization and how to set up all of those infrastructures, but if you're gonna still be a tax resident in Brazil, the benefits of having a digital company elsewhere are reduced. They still exist. Don't get me wrong. You still have the protection of having your money in your services, like let's say your company bank account, in another jurisdiction that is outside Brazil's control. But from a tax saving point of view, maybe not the most interesting one. However, if you are able to, if you do have more flexibility and you're interested in essentially leaving your your Brazilian tax residency and going to a digital nomad or going to a more interesting country, then is when those zones really start to make the most sense, right? So Zanzibar, as you were saying, is a completely digital zone. We've been working with the government over there for a few years now, and basically they have we have a platform that allows you to interact with the government there completely digitally, right? So you can create your company, you can pay and receive invoices, you can sign contracts, and you can those companies, you can not only create them there, but you can also duplicate companies that are already existing in Zanzibar's blockchain. So that's a much easier and streamlined way. We were talking before about the bureaucracy that we have in Brazil. That's something that is a million times easier over there, right? And then once you have your company there, you can use it to mostly operate global businesses, right? Because it's so well integrated with multiple currencies, not only fiat like US dollars, euros, and whatnot. You're also integrated with crypto, right? So if you're hiring services from other people across the world, this international banking system, let's call those financial railways, are much more streamlined than if you were to do something similar in Brazil. And then finally, you have the you have the potential for investments and some benefits that Zanzibar gives you, like apart from all the tax benefits and tax exemptions that are even some industries that are prioritized with even greater incentives in credit and easier regulations. We can, I think they're very big in tourism, in what they call blue economy, which is sustainable ocean practices. Then infrastructure and real estate, it's an island with almost 2 million people that has seen a 10 times increase in the number of tourists over the last 10 years. So maybe you want to diversify and invest in some real estate there, or some tourism as well. And also with the digital zone, of course, they're trying to go big in technology, in ICT sectors, and attract some companies there to develop the local economy with this interface, with this global interface. So there's a bit of an overview of what you could do if you are a Brazilian trying to diversify and think a bit outside Brazilian jurisdictions, because, well, I don't want to go into detail about all the problems that one might see in the current Brazilian landscape and the level of legal insecurity that we have right now.
It was amazing. I think we went through a lot of, I always try to bring like context, but also in the same time to educate and be technical. I think we combined all of that in this podcast. It was amazing.
Nice.
We're heading to the end of the podcast. Let's just wrap it up with a provocation. So thinking about the future, so I always like to work with, of course, a long-term view, but looking ahead in about 2 years.
2 years.
Next year we have elections in Brazil, and the elections, as we know, especially what we saw like this year in America, can change a lot of things, like when it comes to policies.
Yeah, they do.
Most people, they underestimate what's being done by the administration. You don't have to like it or not, but just the Genius Act, when it comes to stablecoins, has an impact in the future of finance, digital finance. So next year as well, with elections in Brazil, everything can change. Yeah, when it comes to crypto, still is not like, to be honest, I'm going to be completely fair. I don't feel like the current government is against crypto. Not like, it's not on the level like the previous administration in America was, because the SEC was actually fighting against crypto. Not in Brazil. It's more like I don't know, they just don't, I don't think they care
not enough. A priority, right? Yeah, they don't care enough.
They don't care enough. They're trying some stuff, actually. I always like, of course, trying to do something in the state level. That's the Brazilian culture. But still, if we get a more progressive administration looking ahead and integrating crypto into their policies, things can move faster. So looking ahead in about 2 years, what do you envision? What do you feel like it could happen when it comes to new technologies, of course, incorporating crypto, stablecoins, AI, blockchain?
Only in Brazil or worldwide?
A lot in America, perhaps. I think it would be nice for Brazil, but a lot in America, in the world, whatever you want to bring up.
Okay. What do I think could happen in the next 2 years? And by the way, you saying 2 years is a long-term horizon. It's a testament to how fast things are changing right now. But thinking what could change. To be fair, I'm not too optimistic with Brazil. And that's not because any particular government, of course, that influences. I'm not too optimistic because I think of the institutions and values we have and the initiatives currently in place. I do think that they're going to take much more than 2 years for us to see some new forms of governance or some streamlined zones that are more impactful than just, let's say, Manaus export zone, which is fine, but not really a game changer, right? So in Brazil, I do think that we still have a long way to go. However, in Americas as a whole, you mentioned Crecimiento in Argentina, which is a great initiative. There are also some other things bubbling up over there. There's Prospera, as we mentioned. There's also Ciudad Morazán in Honduras as well, that is more oriented towards manufacturing and manufacturing jobs. In those zones over the next 2 years, I am optimistic. I do think that we can see more. We are going to see more investment in those places, and the compounding effect, right? Of well, it's 2 years from now. 2 years from now, they will have 2 more years of track record, which means that they'll continue to be stable, hopefully, and they'll continue having companies that are growing there. I think Prospera right now is like 300, has 300 companies registered in their platform. Crecimiento, 3 years ago, I think did not even existed, right? And we see that they are now gathering communities, building relevant companies, and attracting investment over there. So and we see some other initiatives popping up in Latin America as well that I'm not so sure we can talk about right now because it's already ending. But to summarize, yeah, in those that are already working in other places in Latin America, I think they continued innovation financing, economical development, and governance innovations will continue stably for the next 2 years, and hopefully much more than that.
I think it's the interesting thing that you mentioned is like you're not too optimistic with Brazil, but on the Latin America level, I think I'm super bullish on Latam. But not only that, I feel like again, even though we don't have like formally called economic zones, I feel like certain places in Latin America, they're starting to interact with each other more. Like I see more people now going to Buenos Aires because of the events there in blockchain. So I think there's a lot of integration happened in the cultural level, which also reflects digitally. And once it's digital, like Balaji said, online communities start online. So I feel like there's a lot of things that are already being built online, and we will only realize once we have the physical infra to support that. So I think there's actually an effect of globalization, not only Latin America, but I see like integration and more talks between like with Africa, with Southeast Asia. Like as you know, I'm also leading marketing for clients in Brazil and Latin America, and the company is from the Philippines, from Southeast Asia, and they're looking at Brazil, so they're trying to build a corridor, financial corridor. So, and if you're talking about building a financial corridor between Latin America and Asia, you go through Africa and Europe as well. So, honestly, I feel like there's a lot of being built, and most people, even us, we are not having the time to wrap up our minds on it, what is actually happening. But in about 2 years, we will look back
Sometimes you see an initiative that seems to be so far ahead, and you didn't even know about the existence of those people, and you go, "Wow, I didn't know that this was happening," but I'm happy to find out. Yeah, hopefully that will happen with me in Brazil. Maybe the reason why I'm not so optimistic is because I see more news about Brazil, and maybe that has a negative bias on me, and then on other places I see more of the positive things that are related to or circle, or the things we see. Also in Colombia, to mention that, because you said globalization and networking and all of that, Colombia, for example, has become one of the greatest hub for digital nomads, right? Exactly. And this is also something that can trigger innovation and make the government, for example, realize that, hey, we have all of those people coming to our place, to our country. Maybe we can create some kind of tax arrangement, fiscal arrangement that will incentivize them to stay here longer. Open companies, having some kind of bank accounts that will ultimately be revenue for the government, right? So that's also a powerful way to build those zones, starting with the community first, as you said.
Yeah, there is one interesting thing happening in Latin America is for a long time, Brazilians, but we're the only country that speaks Portuguese in Latin America, and that kind of like separated us from the rest of Spanish countries. But now what I'm seeing more is it's something like it's not, again, a lot of things are happening. It's not like we come to an official agreement. It's just happening. I see a lot of people now, like Argentinians speaking in English with Brazilians, and Brazilians speaking English. It's almost like English became like the because there's some, how can I say, pride as well. I don't want to speak, like I know how to speak Spanish, but honestly, if you come to my country in Brazil, I speak like Portuguese and vice versa as well. So I feel like there's some, like the way to work around this, like a national pride or even language pride, is to speak English, and then that actually ties up with my thesis around English becoming the lingua franca of the network. So I think that's a whole different episode. I don't want to go over that. But well, it was amazing having you here, Lucas. Thank you so much. I'm gonna leave you just a small space for you, probably to pitch your social medias, a personal project people would like to for people to get to know. So there is a few minutes for you.
Well, no, I truly appreciate it as well. Thank you, Ricardo, for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about special economic zones and special charter zones. I'm really into it, and I truly believe that this is a better way for us to organize and can have plenty of benefits for us as a society. Professionally, you can find me in LinkedIn. I think is the channel where I'm most active. To be fair, I'm not too active over there, but you're going to find me Lucas Russo, Russo, in LinkedIn. As Ricardo said, I'm working with Tools for the Commons, and I also help small digital companies with their overall marketing strategy. Thinking a bit beyond just paid ads, but how they can really sell something that's worth it and meaningful for their customers.
Amazing. Thank you so much once again, Lucas.
Thank you,
this
Ricardo.
was actually the last episode of this season of Diffusion podcast. We're coming with some new things in the next episode. So it was amazing having you here to wrap up this season. So that's it for guys for today. And I'll see you on the next phase of the Diffusion podcast in about 2 weeks.